The rain-slicked streets of Chicago glistened under the sodium glow of streetlights. And I stood outside the dive bar, cigarette dangling from my lips, daring the world to notice me. My name is Julian Carter. And back then, I was all sharp edges leather jacket, chipped tooth, and a smirk that said I'd seen too much to care. That night, I locked eyes with Ethan Wells, and something in the universe cracked open. He was leaning against the bar's brick wall, his breath visible in the November chill, his scarf loose around his neck like he didn't care about the cold. I didn't know him yet, but I knew his type: quiet, thoughtful, the kind of guy who carried poetry in his pocket and pain in his eyes. "Got a light?" I asked, my voice low, testing him. He hesitated, then knelt to dig through his bag, pulling out a battered Zippo. I laughed, sharp and mean. "You're really gonna kneel for me? Huh?" His eyes flicked up, steady, unashamed, and I felt a jolt like he saw through every wall I'd built. We didn't talk much that night. I lit my cigarette, exhaled smoke into the air between us, and walked away, certain I'd never see him again. But Chicago's a small city when fate gets involved. 2 weeks later, I spotted him at a protest downtown, holding a sign that read, "Love is not a crime." His hands shook as he faced a line of cops, their batons gleaming under the floodlights. I was there for the chaos, not the cause back then. I didn't believe in anything but survival. But watching Ethan stand his ground, I felt something shift. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for everyone like us. I joined the crowd, not because I cared, but because I wanted to be near him. When the police pushed forward, I grabbed his arm, pulling him into an alley before the tear gas hit. "You're gonna get yourself killed," I hissed, my heart pounding. He looked at me, eyes bright with defiance. "Better than living in silence," he said. That was the moment I knew I was in trouble, because Ethan Wells wasn't just a guy with a lighter. He was a spark. Over the next few months, we collided like planets. I was a drifter, bouncing between odd jobs, pretending, delivery, whatever paid the rent. Ethan was a grad student, studying sociology, always scribbling in notebooks about justice and identity. We'd argue in coffee shops until 2 a.m. Me calling him naive, him calling me cynical. But every fight ended with us closer, his hand brushing mine, my laugh softening his edges. One night, in my cramped apartment, he kissed me. And it wasn't just a kiss, it was a promise. I'd never been kissed like that, like I was worth something. But love doesn't erase the world. My family had disowned me at 17 when I came out. And Ethan's parents weren't much better, sending him Bible verses instead of birthday cards. Chicago wasn't always kind to guys like us either. We'd get stares walking hand in hand. And once, a group of drunk guys followed us from a bar, shouting slurs. I wanted to fight, but Ethan pulled me away, whispering, "They're not worth it." I hated how calm he was, how he believed people could change. I didn't believe in change, I believed in surviving. One night, everything broke. We were at a club, the music pulsing, bodies pressed together in a haze of sweat and neon. Ethan was laughing, his head thrown back. And I thought, this is what freedom feels like. Then a guysome nobody with a beer gut and too much courage called us out, loud enough for the whole club to hear. "Faggots don't belong here." He spat. I saw red. Before Ethan could stop me, I swung. The fight was quick, brutal. By the time security pulled me off, my knuckles were bloody, and Ethan's face was pale. Outside, under the flickering streetlights, he grabbed my shoulders. "Why do you do this, Julian?" he shouted, his voice breaking. "You think fighting makes you strong. It just makes you alone." I wanted to yell back, to tell him he didn't get it, that I'd been alone my whole life. But his eyes, those damn eyes, held me still. I'm not going anywhere, he said softly. But you've got to stop running. I didn't know how to stop. Running was all I knew, running from my past. From the pain. From the fear that if I let myself love him, the world would take him away. That night, I didn't go home with him. I walked the streets until dawn, chain-smoking, trying to outrun the truth. I was falling for him, and it terrified me. By morning, I was at his apartment, my boots scuffing his doorstep. He opened the door, bleary-eyed, and didn't say a word. Just pulled me inside, handed me a coffee, and sat with me in silence. That was Ethan, always steady, always there, even when I didn't deserve it. I looked at him, his hair a mess, his glasses crooked, and thought, I don't know how to do this, but I want to try. Trying meant learning to live with Ethan's world, which was all heart and hope, so different from mine. We started spending more time together, weaving our lives into something that felt like home. He'd drag me to community meetings, where people talked about rights and representation, and I'd roll my eyes but stay because he believed in it. I got a steady job at a garage, fixing cars, my hands always smeared with grease. Ethan would show up after his classes, leaning against a toolbox, reading aloud from his notes while I worked. You're going to get oil on your fancy books, I'd tease. But secretly, I loved Ethan's voice, his presence, the way he made the world feel less heavy. But the world didn't let us forget who we were. One evening, we were walking through Lincoln Park, hand in hand, when a man spat at our feet. Disgusting, he muttered, loud enough for us to hear. I felt the old rage flare, my fists clenching, but Ethan squeezed my hand. Let it go, he whispered. I didn't want to, but for him, I did. That night, lying in his bed, I asked, how do you stay so calm? He traced circles on my palm and said, because I know what we have is bigger than their hate. His words stuck with me, but they didn't erase the fear. I started noticing things: how Ethan would tense when we passed certain streets, how he'd check his phone obsessively after getting anonymous messages online. He never told me the details, just brushed it off as trolls, but I could see the weight on him. One night, I found him staring at his laptop, his face pale. What is it? I asked. He closed the screen quickly, but not before I saw the words, "You'll pay for this." Someone had found his blog, where he wrote about being gay in America, and the comments were vicious. I wanted to hunt down whoever sent those messages, but Ethan stopped me. This is why I do what I do, he said. If I stop speaking out, they win. I didn't understand his courage. Not then. To me, fighting meant fists, not words. But Ethan fought with ideas, with hope, and I was starting to see how much stronger that was. Then came the rally. Ethan had been organizing it for weeks. A march for equality through downtown Chicago. I told him it was dangerous, tensions were high, and the news was full of stories about protests turning ugly. But he was relentless, printing flyers, rallying volunteers. You don't have to come, he told me, but I saw the hope in his eyes. So I went, not because I believed in the cause, but because I believed in him. The day of the rally was bright, the kind of crisp fall day that makes you feel alive. Thousands showed up, waving flags, chanting. Ethan was at the front, his voice steady over a megaphone, talking about love and freedom. I stood at the edge of the crowd, watching him, my chest tight with something I couldn't name. Then I saw them counter-protesters, their signs hateful, their voices louder than the chants. One of them, a guy with a buzz cut and a cruel smile, broke through the line, heading straight for Ethan. I moved before I thought, shoving through the crowd, my heart pounding. By the time I reached him, the guy was inches from Ethan, screaming slurs. I stepped between them, my fists ready, but Ethan grabbed my arm. Don't, he said, his voice low but firm. The guy laughed, spitting at us before security dragged him away. The crowd kept chanting, but I could barely hear it over the blood rushing in my ears. After the rally, we sat on a bench in Grant Park, the city skyline glittering in the distance. Ethan was quiet, his hands shaking. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded, but his eyes were wet. "I just want a world where we don't have to fight for this," he said. I pulled him close, my arms around him, and for the first time, I didn't feel like running. I felt like fighting for him. For us. That night, back at his apartment, we didn't talk about the rally or the hate. We cooked dinner-burnt pasta, because neither of us was any good in the kitchen, and laughed until we couldn't breathe. Later, lying in bed, I whispered, "I'm not going anywhere." He smiled, his fingers tracing my jaw. "Good," he said, "because I need you." Needing someone was new to me. I'd spent years building walls, convinced I was better off alone. But Ethan had a way of slipping through, not by force, but by being himself, steady, kind, unbreakable. Winter came to Chicago, blanketing the city in snow, and our lives settled into a rhythm. Mornings were my favorite. Ethan, half asleep, fumbling with his shoelaces, and me kneeling to tie them. A quiet ritual that felt like a vow. "You're gonna make me soft." I'd grumble, but he'd just laugh, pulling me up for a kiss. We were happy, but happiness is fragile when the world's watching. Ethan's blog was gaining attention, and with it came more threats. He tried to hide them, but I'd catch him deleting emails, his jaw tight. "It's nothing," he'd say, but I knew better. One night, I woke up to find him gone from bed. He was in the living room, staring at his phone. A message open, "You're not safe." I grabbed the phone, my hands shaking with rage. "Who sent this?" I demanded. He wouldn't look at me. "It doesn't matter," he said. "It's just words." But words can cut deeper than knives. The next day, I insisted on going with him to a community center where he was giving a talk. The room was packed, mostly young people, their eyes wide as Ethan spoke about love, identity, and fighting for a better world. I stood at the back, arms crossed, scanning the crowd. That's when I saw him, the same guy from the rally, buzz cut and all, sitting in the last row. His eyes locked on Ethan. I moved fast, slipping out to call security. But when I got back, the guy was gone. Ethan finished his talk, the room erupting in applause. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That night, I told him about the guy. "You're paranoid," Ethan said, but his voice lacked conviction. I wanted to believe him, but the threats were piling up, and I could see the toll they were taking. Dark circles under his eyes, his smile less frequent. Then came the night that changed everything. We were walking home from a diner. The streets quiet, snow crunching under our boots. A figure stepped out of the shadows, his face half hidden by a hood. I recognized him instantly. Buzz cut. Same cruel smile. He held something in his hand, metal glinting under the streetlight. "You think you can just parade around?" he snarled, stepping closer. My body moved on instinct, shoving Ethan behind me. "Stay back," I told him, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my chest. The guy lunged, and I swung, my fist connecting with his jaw. He staggered but didn't go down. Ethan yelled my name, but I barely heard him over the adrenaline. The guy came at me again, and I felt a sharp pain in my side. I didn't realize I'd been stabbed until I saw the blood. Ethan screamed, tackling the guy, his fists wild. By the time the police arrived, the attacker was gone, and I was on the ground, Ethan's hands pressing against my wound, his voice begging me to stay awake. I woke up in a hospital, machines beeping, Ethan asleep in a chair beside me. His hand was wrapped around mine, his face streaked with tears. When he saw I was awake, he broke down, his head on my chest. "I thought I lost you," he whispered. I wanted to tell him I was fine, but the pain in my side and the look in his eyes stopped me. For the first time, I understood what he meant about fighting for something bigger. This wasn't just about use, it was about every moment we'd fought to have. Every kiss. Every morning, I tied his shoes. The police caught the guy a week later, a loner with a history of hate crimes. Ethan testified at the trial, his voice steady as he recounted that night. I sat in the courtroom, still sore from the stitches, watching him speak with a courage I'd never had. He wasn't just fighting for us anymore. He was fighting for everyone who'd ever been targeted for who they loved. Recovery was slow, but Ethan was there every step. He moved into my apartment, turning my chaotic space into something warm, with books stacked on every surface and his laughter filling the silence. I went back to the garage, but I wasn't the same Julian. The scar on my side was a reminder not of the pain, but of what we'd survived. Ethan kept writing, kept speaking, but he was more careful now, and I was more protective. We were a team, stronger for it. One spring morning, we walked to the park where we'd had our first real fight, the one that ended with me promising to stay. The trees were blooming, pink petals drifting like snow. Ethan stopped at a bench, his hands in his pockets, his eyes bright. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice soft. "About us. About what we mean to each other." He pulled out a small box, and my heart stopped. Inside were 2 simple rings. Silver. Unpolished. Like us. "Julian Carter," he said, kneeling. "Will you marry me?" I laughed, tears stinging my eyes, and pulled them up. "You're stealing my move," I said, but I was already saying yes. My arms around him, the world fading away. We didn't care who was watching, didn't care about the stares or the whispers. We'd earned this. The wedding was small, just us and a few friends in a community center, the same one where Ethan had given his talk. I wore a suit that didn't quite fit, and Ethan's tie was crooked, but when we said our vows, every word felt like a victory. "I once made you kneel to light my cigarette," I said, my voice breaking. "Now I kneel every morning to tie your shoes, because loving you is the best thing I've ever done." He smiled, tears in his eyes, and kissed me, the room cheering. Life didn't get easier, but it got better. Ethan kept fighting, writing, speaking, and I started joining him not just for him, but for me, for us, for every kid like me who'd been kicked out, for every person like Ethan who believed in a better world. We faced more hate, more threats, but we faced them together. Every morning, I tied his shoes, and every night, he held me close, and that was enough. Years later, we sat on that same park bench, older, a little worn, but still us. Ethan's hair was graying, and my hands were rougher, but our rings still shone. A kid walked by, holding hands with his boyfriend, unafraid, and Ethan squeezed my hand. "That's why we fought," he said. I nodded, my throat tight. We hadn't changed the world, but we'd changed our corner of it, and that was everything. Our love wasn't just a rebellion against hate. It was a promise to keep going, to keep loving, no matter what. Every morning, I knelt to tie his shoes, not out of duty, but out of loving a love that had carried us through pain, fear, and triumph. And as the sun set over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of gold, I knew I'd kneel for him every day, for as long as we had.